Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm Kojo Buff, and this podcast is an extension of my book of the same name, which is a collection of essays, reflections, and poems where I explore the lessons of life. I delve into identity, fatherhood, loss, work, and a bunch of other things. My guest for this episode is Ghanaian photographer Rodney Quarcoo. We chat about his journey into photography, his relationship with his father, and how having children helped him make better sense of that relationship, and his process as a photographer, amongst other things. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Mr. RQ, thank you for joining me on my podcast, Listen to Your Footsteps.
Thanks for having me. It's long overdue.
Yeah, we've been trying to line this up for a while.
I know, right?
So my standard opening question is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
It's funny you should ask that. I think recently I was thinking about it, and I honestly can't pinpoint anything I really, really wanted to be. I in my childhood, I think I was really much a floater. I used to daydream a lot, and yeah, honestly, because I've had conversations with friends, and they say, "Oh, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a policeman." I can't tell you anything I wanted to be as a child. It's so bizarre. It's funny. I only thought about it like 2 weeks ago.
I mean, so were you born and raised in Accra?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
So went through your schooling. What kind of background, what kind of home did you grow up in?
Okay, in terms of home, my dad, I think, was still finding himself when he had me. He was married to my mom. Actually, were they married? I think so. They had like a little ceremony thing, I think. And so yeah, they had me, and then my sister 4 years later. But by the time my sister was born, they had split up. So yeah, growing up was interesting, to say the least. I went to a primary school, Christ the King, in Accra, and then from there I did secondary school. They were just introducing the new system, as they call it. Right now, it's the system, but at the time they were introducing junior high school and senior high school, and my dad wanted me to be in the old system, which is the O-level and A-level system. And so I was in the last batch of that system. It was interesting. I guess my being at the end of it, watching like the newbies coming in terms of like the new system and stuff was interesting. So I have friends who are, O-level, A-level people, and then I have like the new breed of the education system. And family wise, it was an interesting time. It was difficult at times. Took me a long time to kind of like understand the ebbs and flows and what I was going through. I think it was more, I processed it more so as an adult and also as a parent, because I would remember instances when I would probably ask my dad for something and he would like blow his top. And now I kind of get it. Like I would get why he would respond like that, because he comes from an era where why do I have to explain myself to a child? Like, why do I have to tell you that, my finances aren't great right now, so this thing you're asking me for is frustrating the hell out of me.
I think it is interesting, and you did post something around it some time back, but it's also something I've written about quite a bit in terms of, I think I had a slightly different relationship with my father because he was my only parent for most of my life. But having the liberty of some years behind you and then getting children, it put a lot of stuff into perspective. And one, with hindsight, one was, I guess, becomes a lot more forgiving in terms of some of the things that our parents did.
Totally. I put it up on Father's Day. I wasn't going to at the time. every now and again, I'll just put like a photo of him and say, love you and stuff. And like, I had read a few people's like tributes to their, all the, I find that social media just is a nice space. Like they put out all just the fun, good stuff. And I'm like, if I was going to go and wax lyrical about my dad, I have to say what it is, And so I put it up and I said, like, it's been an interesting time being his son, getting to know him, getting to understand the responsibilities that he had and how it must have weighed him down at the time. It's been interesting. So he's saying that your dad was your only parent. So for the longest time when my parents split up, it was just me and him essentially. And he used to travel on business. He used to take me everywhere. And then he got with my stepmom. Like my dad's, how should I put it? My dad's, so basically, okay, he has 8 kids with 5 women, right? And I got to know them at different stages in my life, right? I think there was a time when I had met my older sister, and I don't think it had registered that she was my sister. It was just friends. And then I met my older brother when I was like in my 30s. Right. So like it's been an interesting time being his son. I told myself that, look, my father was born before World War II. It was like compared to today, it was like prehistoric, right? So like the way they did things then is totally different. And again, in hindsight, and with the responsibilities I have now, I mean, I understand, and I appreciate that it must have been difficult. Not it must have been, it was difficult. Like because I think up until me, he hadn't lived with any of his kids.
So he was also learning to be a father.
Exactly. So it was tough for him because he went to the School of Ordnance, which is a military school. He always told me stories about how him and his father used to, butt heads, and they actually had physical fights. And so, I mean, knowing this now and thinking of our relationship, I probably got it a lot easier than he did. And so, but then it doesn't mean that everything that happened between us should have, and or should have happened that it did, but it did. It's life. And there's that cliche about what doesn't break you makes you stronger. And we're chatting and I'm smiling. So hey.
So one of the things that always fascinated me doing, because I did my O levels and A levels. Well, I did my Form 6, which became International Baccalaureate. But in being a bit of a history buff and enjoying history at school, it always fascinated me. I mean, growing up in Lesotho, seeing my Ghanaian father, and I'm going to school and I'm learning about colonialism.
Right.
And I'm looking at this man and going, wait a minute, like this guy was born in the Gold Coast. Like he was born, raised, and lived in the Gold Coast till his mid-20s. Yeah. And now he's navigating this new world that's constantly changing, and he's traveled the world, and it must have been such a big leap. I mean, we've had leaps, but not as significant as the leaps that they had.
Right. It was just like, I mean, my dad tells me stories and it's bewildering. Like, and it's funny, like my dad right now, he's like a certified Apple user. He uses his iPhone, and I look at him and I think, look at this man go! Like he's there, and he's sending freaking WhatsApps and forwarding stuff, and like I'm like, you're freaking 85 years old. How the hell are you? Like, definitely. Like the times have changed. Everything has changed, like around them, and even around us. When you think about it, like the pandemic. When I look at my 5-year-old, or 6-year-old, she's gonna knock my head. When I look at my 6-year-old and how computer savvy she is, like when I was her age, I definitely didn't even. I guess there were no virtual calls at the time, but she uses a computer way better than I did, probably in my early teens. You know, but it's it's a sign of the times, I guess.
Okay, let's jump back a little bit. And how did photography come about? Because I mean, I was looking at your bio. I took the time to actually try and figure out your bio. I mean, we've been interacting for so long, and we never spent time kind of going, okay, but what are the little milestones along the way? And I was looking, you did what? Business and operations management or something?
Yeah.
In the UK?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I studied business and operations management. That was also a different era for me, because I was alone for a long time in the UK. I left home. When I left for the UK, my dad didn't know I had left, because we had an issue, and I was going to tell him I was leaving, and he stormed off. And I was like, all right. My friend of mine dropped me off at the airport, and I left Ghana. It was a very lonely time.
How did that come about? I mean, how did the like, okay, I'm leaving now, I'm going to go to the UK?
So I was in the UK, and I did like I had done a city and guilds in data communications and networks, and I was supposed to go on to college and then university and all that. But again, I think it wasn't a great time for him financially, so he asked me to come back to Ghana and years. And that was what he said. Oh, come back to Ghana and wait a while. And I'm like, what am I waiting for? And he didn't say anything. And it became like a little tussle between us, because fine, you want me to come, I'm here now, but I'm not doing anything productive. And I'm like getting frustrated. And it's like two men in the same space. And one of them thinks he's arrived. The other one is calm yourself. And so there was this incident, a bus stop we had, and I just figured that I had the ticket that it was. So when I was coming back, it was a return ticket. And so I had the going back to the UK leg of it. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to leave. And so I was going to him to tell him I was going to leave. But I think that day he was going to see friends or going to some event or whatever. And when I walked up to him and I started talking to him, he just up and walked out the house, jumped in his car and drove off. So I called a friend of mine. He picked me up. He dropped me off at the airport. And then, yeah, I went, stayed at with a friend and his mom for a couple years until I could find myself. It was for most of the time I was in England, I was probably depressed until my sister joined me. And even when she joined me, she was in Kent. I was in Oxford at the time. So it's not something, we didn't see each other a lot. We'll see each other on holidays and stuff like that. But at least it was nice to have her in the same geographic space. Yeah, it was difficult. So then I did business and operations management. I played American football in England.
I was going to ask, how do you go to Oxford and become like a middle linebacker and a defensive end in American football team?
All right. I know. Yeah, so I was at Oxford Brookes University when it was time to, they had like a sports fair, and I went to check out what sports I could partake in. I really wanted to do martial arts, and so that was the first thing I signed up for. And they paired me up against a girl. And I was like, how am I going to hit a girl? Come on now. And so we just went through the motions. It was like, all right, cool. This is not for me. I want something where I can take out my frustrations. That's why I probably joined the martial arts thing. And so then I saw that they had, there was an American football team with the combined universities. So Oxford Brookes and then Oxford University had an American football team that was like combined, because they didn't have a lot. of players per school to be able to have two teams. So in that sport, there was a combined universities team, and I signed up for it. I joined. I called up. I remember I spoke to the coach, Phil DeMonte, cool ass guy. I told him I've never played before, and he just looked at my heights. He's like, "Come, come join us." And yeah, I learned the game there. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience for me. I think it was one of my one of the places that I could escape, you know, like the stress of life. In we used to play on Sundays, so every Monday I'll be broken up, and then you know that with the American system, it was the US system. What am I saying? The UK system. So every Monday I was in the hospital, like checking myself to make sure that I wasn't broken up too much or battered too much. And, you know, like, I guess in my pain, I was like, you know, I had forgotten all the craziness of my life. But yeah, so I played American football. It was a fun time. I was pretty good at it. I think the first year I joined, or the second year, because I played for four years. The second year we went to the college finals. The second year, so we came second, and then the next year we won. And then I got called to join the Great British team. They were going to go to the US, but then I had messed up my shoulder so bad I had to have shoulder surgery, so I couldn't join it. But I was the first non-Brit they had, you know, commandeered to join the team. So that was kind of amazing. But yeah, I didn't, after my surgery, I didn't go back to it much. I played for a while, and then I was like, yeah, no, I love my bones. Yeah, and then I stayed in the UK for a while. I worked in mainly IT help desk type stuff. And then like all the time I used to shoot photos. I had a point and shoot camera that a friend of mine gave me. At the time you could get a computer combo set, and then it would come with like a printer and all that. And he had a camera, and he's like, what am I going to do with this? I was like, oh, can I have it? And he was like, yeah. So he gave it to me. And so like anytime we go out with friends and stuff to eat, have fun, when we are on the road to play games and stuff, I'll take photos. And at the time, Facebook was a thing. I would, you know, create albums, share them. Actually, it wasn't even Facebook. It was something. It was some shared thing. I mean, I used to be on Black Planet a lot. Do you remember Black Planet?
Yeah, I didn't spend much time on it, but I do. I do remember.
Right. Yeah. You know, stuff like that. There was some social sharing sites of some sorts at the time, and I used to be on there a lot. But yeah, that was me and photography. But even way back when I was in Ghana, before I went to the UK, my dad, he was an electronics engineer, and so he always had some form of like either some form of a gadget, like a video camera, a camera, or whatever. And I always like gravitated towards them. I would be the guy who photos when we are on family holidays and stuff. So that was me and photography. I guess it's been there. When I moved back home, then it became a profession.
Why did you move back home? I mean, what prompted that decision?
So when I was in England, my grandfather died. I couldn't afford to come pay my respects and, you know, farewell. I was really, really close to him. It was my mom's dad. He was really, really cool guy. I guess one of the reasons I think I learned a lot from him. In the turmoil of my life, he was like a father figure. You know, so I learned a lot from him. And then my dad's mom died, and again I couldn't come. And my dad at the time he was in his late 60s, I think, or early 70s. And I guess as much as we had an interesting relationship, I didn't want a case where he would pass away and then here's me stuck in England and I can't come. And also it was a thing where I didn't want to be a statistic. You know, you see somebody on the bus, oh, I'm from Ghana. I came here 48 years ago. And like, I didn't want to be that
guy. Because also the interesting thing is that so many people try to get out with a particular idea of what out looks like. It doesn't matter where out is in the world, but when they get there, they discover that it's very easy to then get caught in this trap where you're there for 40 years because you can't come back.
Totally, yeah. I didn't want that to be my story, and I think my sister had moved home before me, and she had joined one of the banks here, and she was like, hey, Ghana is really cool. And I was like, why not? Let's give it a go. And so, yeah, I think one of the things too was at the time I was working nights, and I came home one time and I had a letter from bailiffs saying that I had to pay council tax or something, and it was long overdue, and I was just frustrated. And in the time, once I paid it off, and I think I just paid off my bank loan. So I didn't have, basically I'd wiped the slate clean. So it's stay here and stay in this rat race of a life, of an existence, or go back home and see what you can make of yourself. I was like, maybe home won't be such a bad idea. And so I upped and left. It's funny, like my sister's husband, his business, he has a like freight forwarding shipping type operation, logistics. And so he was like, oh sure, I'll move your stuff to Ghana. and so he got a guy to come and pick up all my stuff, and like I packed everything in my apartment. When I tell you everything, like when the stuff got to Ghana, because I got home and then it came later, I opened the bag and it had trash in it. Like I was like, yo, I'm out. I just packed everything and I moved back home. I was like, yeah, I think I had it. Like, I remember when I was working with the valuation office. It's one of the departments of the Inland Revenue. This was in Oxford, and I had a lovely line manager. One time I was at work, and I was sitting at work and I just started crying. I couldn't control it. And I mean, like, eyes falling, tears, like, like everything, like, like all the funny convulsions you have during crying, and all the, like, full on crying for like maybe 20 minutes. And this woman, white people, like, oh, what's the message? You want some tea? Are you okay? Like, and she was confused. Like, imagine big ass dude like me just sitting across from you.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, I was just depressed. I was
like everything was just coming out, and it got to the point where you couldn't keep it inside anymore.
And at that time, I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I mean, like, life can't be worse back home. Let's go. And I was like, I'm moving back to Ghana. Yeah, it was an interesting time. Like, I have a lot of fun memories, don't get me wrong, but it was a difficult time.
So one of the things that fascinated me around you moving back to Ghana, because we started interacting on Twitter in, I think was like 2000 and probably 2009, 2010.
Yeah. 2000, I think it was 2008, 2009.
I joined September 2008, and I think I came to Ghana that December.
Right. Yeah, and we had started chatting before you came to Ghana. We had up with Deborah and all those kind of things.
When we still had Fufu Gang and everything.
Exactly.
So what was interesting for me was, my going back to Ghana for the first time, in essence, in my life, because I'd previously been there as a 5-year-old, which I did not remember. But also seeing where Ghana was then, especially in comparison to where it is now. But watching you kind of going back in and navigating the space as a photographer. So not as anything else, but That's I've always known you to be a photographer, right?
Right.
And trying to build, I guess, a business and a life as a photographer. What was that like? For me, just the concept of it, like to get back there and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do in a space that still seemed very, very restrained and very conservative. I mean, it still is at its heart, but things have
Right.
changed quite a bit over the last, over the last, 10 years?
Mm-hmm. You saying asking this is making me smile because I moved I moved back, and my father had lined up a job interview for me with I think it was one of these banks. I forget which one it was. He had a friend who worked in the IT department, and because I was doing help desk and IT stuff in England, he thought, "Oh yeah, my son, yeah, it's a computer guru." and um, and I was supposed to go for this interview, and knowing the fact that I'll be working in this stifling environment for the simple fact that I have to wear a suit to work every day,
In
and in this heat, I swear to God,
in a crowd weather.
dude, it's so hot here. And I was like, yeah, no, I can't. So I never went for the interview. And this is another thing that became a thing with us. He's like, yeah, you were supposed to go here, and then the man waited and you didn't come. And like, I'm like, dude, it's not me. I can't. And so like, what are you doing with your life? I'm a photographer. Like, what the F? Right? And you see, it's a thing where he I'm really glad I took that path and that decision to stay a creative. It hasn't been an easy journey, I would tell you that, but it's been worth it. It's been very fulfilling. Right now, my dad is the first person to tell, "Oh, my son is a photographer," you know. But yeah, it was difficult because one, people didn't respect the profession. And everybody expected the same, lawyer, doctor. You work in a bank. The banks had become very, very popular because the Nigerian banks had just moved into Ghana, and so the banking system was, or the industry was very vibrant. They had like employed a lot of people, so they had a huge workforce across the different banks. So yeah, and anyone who worked in a bank seemed to be doing well because you could get a loan, you could get a car, and so like they it was like, they had kind of like they were go getters,
Yeah.
And, here's me with my photography hustle. I took a loan to get a camera and like lights and stuff. Yeah, it was when I bought my DSLR was when I actually started learning like how to use a camera, because up until then all I was using was a point and shoot. So it was definitely a very difficult journey. And you can imagine you get a loan to buy equipment to start a business, like the bank is always on your neck every month. You have to pay something. So I think that in that respect, I would say don't start it like that. If you can get a loan from a family, like someone in your family or a friend, it's more it's a more forgiving
Yeah.
forgiving arrangement, because you don't have like all your interest and all that kind of stuff. And um, yeah, so I guess but then at the same time that kind of like spared me to get it done and see it through. um yeah, I mean, people didn't understand, and my father especially, like he would wake up in the morning and I'm still at home and like, aren't you going to work? And I was thinking, work is something I do, not a place I go to. And yeah, again, it took forever for him to get it, but he was very understanding in certain things. Like he allowed me to use the garage in his house as a studio. So I shot a lot of campaigns in there. Yeah, like he was supportive, but very indirectly. He like just for the simple fact that he allowed me to use that space as my studio was so much of a push for me, because you didn't have a lot of photographers with studios, right?
You're listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. Conversations with Africans who are navigating this world on their own terms while trying to live life to the best of their ability. I mean, wait, what was your starting point? I mean, in terms of finding clients, that sort of stuff. Because you've got a camera, you've got lighting.
Yeah.
Now you need to get people to pay you to take pictures.
Yeah. I shot. My sister had a boutique at the time, and I shot a campaign for her. And she wanted to put something in a local magazine, and I shot some photos for her, and she really liked them. And she was the one who actually said, "Oh, you should look to doing this as a profession." And then we had a mutual friend, Audrey, who was getting married like a few months after I had shot that for my sister, and she was like, "Oh, can I shoot her wedding?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And I had never shot a wedding, mind you. I shot it. I did the whole, like, at the time you didn't have people doing all this like pre-wedding shoots and all that. I had a session with them. We had like a portrait session, put it out there, put it on Facebook, put her wedding on Facebook, and that was the beginning of the end. I just put it on Facebook and I became a photographer. Well, a photographer that got paid.
Yeah.
So I was doing portraiture. I was doing weddings. Weddings were my biggest earner, and then I was doing some commercial jobs. I remember I did an ad campaign for Standard Chartered Bank. At the time, they paid me like when I remember how much they paid me, it always makes me laugh. But it was, I guess, the most impactful gig for me, because I was driving through Accra in Osu, and then I saw this big billboard with my work on there. That was such validation for me, because I had only just started, and like here I am doing like a billboard campaign, and yeah, it was awesome. So it was a lot more motivation for me to keep at it. Granted, my name is not on the billboard to say I shot it. Nobody knows until you go and find out who shot it. But for me, it was a very big boost. Like, hey, let me keep at this. And all this happened so early on in my career. And I was learning a lot, and I was making a lot of mistakes. And because there weren't so many, I guess, photographers out there like I was, it was a more forgiving time. You didn't have like, if Rodney messed you up, you didn't say, okay, I'm going to the next person, or you're not. I mean, yeah, you have a lot more options now. And so you have to be sharp with it, and you have to be on point. Like then you could, I mean, I remember so well, I can never do this now. Like I had shot a wedding, I had delayed with delivering the photos, but I had another wedding to shoot. And naive me, when my clients called me to ask me, I was like, "Oh, I'm very busy. I'm sorry. I'm shooting another wedding. That's why I wasn't finish your work." And I'm sure,
yeah,
how's that my business? Like, give me my photos. But yeah, it was an interesting time. Like, and I think one of the things too that sustained me was the learning. Like, shooting with a point and shoot and shooting with a DSLR is totally night and day, right? There's a lot more thought into making your images, and I guess with the point and shoot, I had learned things like composition, and how I want to like see my final work. But with DSLR now, I had to make sure that my lighting was on point, like things weren't overexposed or underexposed, and that whole process of getting it right. And if you get it right, I guess it was a little mini celebration in my mind. And so I tried to get more of that. But yeah, it wasn't the easiest thing to want to be and to try and stay a photographer at the time in this space, because it wasn't seen as a profession of any of any magnitude or any, like, it's not something that people saw and thought, "Oh yeah, he's a photographer, good on him." Like, yeah, it was an interesting time.
Why did you shut down, what's it, RQV Creative Studios?
um, so I guess it had. This is again one of the things that I'll attribute to learning. Um, I was good with the whole creative side, but not the savviest business person. So I didn't have all the systems in place to see it through for it to grow, like building capacity when you need to build capacity, and just all that kind of stuff. So early on in my career, there was a lot of hype around my name, and so that, I guess, brought me work. And there was a time when I started the studio because I wanted to have a bank of photographers who would go out and do the various things. But one, is difficult to work with creatives, especially when they all want to do you, right?
Yeah.
When they all want to do you, like, yeah, it's a pain. But even more so, um, everybody wanted you. On your set. But when I first started out, it was Rodney Quarcoo visuals, and I soon clocked onto the fact that because of my name, they want me, and so then it became the acronym RQV, and so it became RQV Studios. No, it was consulting and studios, because I added the consulting because I wanted to do a lot more than just photography, and it was visual because I wanted to move into video at some point. And it's not, I mean, I could do websites, all that kind of stuff. So it was just, hey, anything creative, anything fun, let's discuss and let's see how we can make it happen. That was basically what I was doing. And at some point, I think I closed down RQV shortly after I got married. It was just, I guess it had run its, it was time. And I was finding that my strengths were in being kind of like a one-man army. So right now I'm a documentary photographer. I shoot video, and I would get help or assistance depending on the size of the project. But essentially, I shoot, edit, everything on my own, and I can produce the work. And it was an easier way to work for me. And then also it gave me the chance to learn the craft and learn about what I can do with myself, if that makes any sense. Because when you're first coming up, and because of hype, you are kind of like overextending. At some point, you have to regroup and then find your center, and then be like, okay, so now that I know that this is how it's supposed to be done, this is how I can move. So I guess it was, yeah, it was its time.
I mean, I find that there's this idea of whatever pursuit that one is, whatever path that one is following. There's this idea of you need to create something, right? So you go into an area, you need to build a business around it. I mean, I know particularly within the South African context, it's like small business, you need to establish a business, and then you need to scale, and you need to create this whole infrastructure, right? But like you're saying, but it comes with it. It comes with long hours, managing people, responsibility, all of these things, and people are still. I mean, I've learned this. The pandemic reinforced it. It's just, I want to work on what I want to work on, and. Right. And I don't necessarily want to build an entire business. I mean, I had a business with a friend of mine, and our idea was that it would grow organically, because neither of us wanted to be an MD or a CEO. And I think there's a lot to be said for that change in mindset. And if one has the opportunity to do that, to be able to go, okay, what is it that I actually want to do? And if it's being able to do the work and work on projects, I don't actually need all of this other stuff.
Right. Yeah, there is that. There definitely is that. For me, I feel like I want to build. So RQV has become Quarcoo Media now. Okay. I registered Quarcoo Media just before the pandemic. And so, as you can imagine, it hasn't really done anything. You know, I really love music and I love all that, basically anything quote unquote creative. So I started producing, uh, I guess, live music events. There was a gym that I had access to. And so I started a monthly series called Ringside. And with that, I was building content for new artists and artists who didn't have a lot of shine, who actually were really dope. Um, and we did, I think, 3 shows, and then the pandemic hit, and then obviously there was lockdown and all that kind of stuff. So Quarcoo Media was going to have like, or is, I guess, because it's still something that is on paper with the Registrar General's office. And at some point, I'm looking to breathe life into it. I have actually paired up with a super creative young man who used to be my intern a few years ago. And recently we reconnected, and he was like, "Oh, Rodney, I understand what you used to talk about back then." And working with people in XYZ and, like, all that kind of stuff. And with his experience behind him and kind of like new outlook on work, I think it's going to be a good pairing. Plus, he's younger than me. I really like working with people who are younger because they bring a new energy, and then there's always a perspective that they have that old man me I'm not looking at. So I'm looking forward to the dynamic between us and churning out projects. I am more, because of my experience, I am more focused on development stuff. Recently, I'm working a lot more in climate change. And then obviously the corporate space, but he's coming from a artsy, like music video, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be a very interesting mix, and see how we work on projects. We have our first project actually we're working on next month. Yeah, we're shooting. We have 2 production days, early mid October. So that is going to be an interesting experience. But I guess my father is a self-made man. If he tells you his story, he came from nothing, and at some point he was like wealthy, right? He's comfortable now. I'm not doing it because I want to be wealthy, but I definitely want to make a mark and leave something that lives beyond me. So right now, it's more about, I don't want it to be a case where, oh, your dad was a great photographer and that's it. Or your dad was a really cool guy, or your dad was a good photographer, whatever. I want it to be, oh, your dad was a really good photographer and he taught me XYZ, or I'm looking to go and go to his work in his company someday. And it's there without me being there, but I have set it up, and then it's, I'm so glad I started teaching, because it has opened my eyes to just building the capacity of the future generation, because I have now the network and contacts to be able to give them what I didn't have when I was in their position. Like when I was learning, nobody will put me in touch with like some dope photographer who had done some project that I admire, and be able to just have a Q&A session with him, and so to pick his brain on, what his influences are, or his workflow, thought processes going into certain things. It was just me in the dark and stumbling forward until to like some shade, and now I'm in a bit of light, in terms of my knowledge. So yeah, a lot of what I want to set up revolves around teaching as well. It's something that I really, really love, and I definitely want to leave something behind that would continue to positively impact the creative landscape.
What is what is your process? But 2, what does I'd written down the title. What does a national photography and design consultant for United Nations Capital Development Fund do? Like, I mean, I've been following because I follow you on all the spaces, but like looking at your your photography around these specific projects. Like, it is compelling, and you're being taken through a journey, right? But what does that person do, and then what's your process to, okay, I'm going to go shoot now? What's your process in terms of doing that?
So September last year, I joined the Capital Development Fund, which is one of the United Nations agencies. And I am basically the go-to guy when it comes to developing visuals for our project. We have a project called the Green Project. And yeah, so that's basically what I do. I listen. I'm in meetings and go on mission, looking at the progress of projects and seeing how best I can tell the story, and then also make images and videos to support our comms and visibility. So it's a fancy title, but I'm just a photographer.
And then just kind of to close off, what's your process in general? Like, how do you approach a photography project?
It has, so if it's a personal project, it has to be something that I find interesting. And Lord knows I find so many things interesting. At one point, a friend of mine says I have shiny ball syndrome. Like, I see something shiny here and I want to chase it. So I find a lot of things interesting, but yeah, it has to be compelling enough for me to want to follow the story or just like have conversations with somebody. Usually it starts from a conversation. It's like, hey, I've seen something, and then I'm like, let me go and then speak to this person. And oftentimes I would find that, this is really interesting. Then I take some photos, and then I come back and I take some more photos. So I have a few like ongoing projects that I haven't realized yet. But yeah, it's just whatever, piques my interest, and then I follow, and then it becomes a thing whereby it becomes a collaborative process, because it's not my story I'm telling. So essentially I have to get to know this person, or the outfit, and see how they work, and then see how best I can tell that story. And then the thing that I try and do as much as possible is to keep it authentic to the subject, and then also my style. I've come to realize that I'm not that photographer who's trying to make beautiful images. I'm not that guy. I don't come and say, oh, let me place this guy here, and then the sun or the lights coming from here. I do it as is, and I try and keep it as real as possible. I try not to influence what I'm seeing. The only time I am not as strict with that is when it's like a video project, because oftentimes you have to redo a certain movement or whatever, so that you just get it in the best light.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like what I see is what I get. Recently I did the 24-hour project, and I was just going through photos from like submissions from other photographers globally, and I'm like, people like are really about, let me make beautiful images. I'm not saying that I don't make
look, I loved that project. Like, I didn't stay up 24 hours, but I was following it through. Having experienced Accra, it was very interesting to kind of see, because I have a weird relationship with Ghana, right? Because it's home, but also I've never lived there, and I've spent short periods of time. So it was interesting following that, because there's a certain connection with the space and connection with the people. At the same time, being divorced from it. Like, so feeling a connection, but kind of going, yeah, it's my home, but it's not my home. Those are my people, but they're not my people, kind of thing. But I really loved watching that and following that thread and that journey.
Yeah, I think that the reason why I try and join it anytime it's on is because it just allows me to I try and do the whole 24 hours because it's just a big challenge. But it pushes me a lot, and it makes me more intentional. Like I go out and find stories in that whole 24-hour period. And like I said, like you'd see somebody who shoot like an awesome sunrise with like a beautiful building in the background and all that kind of stuff, and it's very valid, and I appreciate the beauty in it, but that's not me. I'm more about people and the connection with people and telling people stories, because people exist within these spaces and they all have very diverse stories. And I find that when I'm holding a camera, it just gives me access. It's like, this is one of the reasons, or it gives me a reason to just engage with people. Like if I feel like if I didn't have a camera and want to make an image, there's no reason for me to interact with people, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm on a bus and like there's a conductor, I'm like, hey, what do you do? How long have you been doing this? Do you have kids? You get enough money to feed your kids? Like, and then it becomes a thing. And then if it ever makes it to Instagram, because Lord knows like 1,001 of them haven't, has like a caption and like, Mr. Usu is like a conductor on this line. And, like it allows me to experience people and live vicariously through them. So that's basically, I guess, how I end up starting personal projects. And I don't think I ever finish a lot of them. When I say I don't finish them, I probably think there's a bit more that I can squeeze out of it, but because time waits for no man, and needs money, you move on to things that are paid, and those fall along the way. But then again, I come back to them at some point. Recently, I've just been going through like old hard drives and archiving my work properly. And so like I've been finding loads and loads and loads and loads of content I can share. And I'm like, I've never been a big Instagram poster. Like the 24-hour project is probably the only time when I'm consistently just churning out a 24-hour time. And then every month or two, I'll post something. And I've never made the algorithm, my master. I'm not about, I've got X number of followers or that kind of thing. I'm just chill with it. So what I'm trying to really do is like put some beautiful images and beautiful stories on my website, and then probably start blogging, telling these stories, like either blog form or like little video skits. I think that would be fun to put out, but I just have to sort myself out right now and see all the things that I need to do, and then build a schedule for them. But yeah, in terms of workflow, I mean, I'm pretty easy, I guess. I see something I like. I see if I can fit it in. If it's going to take too long, I would tell the person this is something that I have in mind. As to when I start it, if I find that, okay, I have 2 weeks where I'm free, then I can start it. If not, then it's a conversation we've had, and at some point I'll get to it. But I don't know. I shoot, sit behind a computer for a while, go through all the images that I've shot, pick the ones I think tell the story the best, and then either share with the client or share with the subject or share on social, and on to the next. It's not a lot of there's not a lot that goes into the workflow. It's just if I can do the work, you know what I mean?
I think there's a lot to be said for kind of doing things when they're supposed to be done, and also not pressurizing oneself too much which is something that I've been guilty of. Is I've got this long list of things that I want to do and I'm interested in, and because I'm not doing it, you start to put pressure on yourself. But actually just taking a step back and going, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen, and I'll do it when I'm supposed to do it. Well, thank you for coming onto the podcast. I mean, I know we've talked about this for a while, We talked about doing podcasts for a while, and then when I asked you to come on my podcast, then it was another back and forth in terms of just trying to lock down a time. It's weird how 2 hour difference, 2 hour time difference can sometimes complicate things.
Very true. And yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm glad we've finally been able to do this, and I'm looking forward to like catching up on all the other episodes that you have, and actually one day having our chat for my.
Yeah, we won't say that you interviewed me what 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Oh yes, yeah. That is, I actually used. I'll tell you later, but yeah, it was about 2 months ago.
Thank you for listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. Please do subscribe and leave a review wherever you're listening, and share with friends you feel would enjoy the conversation. I'd also appreciate thoughts and/or comments on my site, coachobuffer.com. Have a great one, and we'll be back again soon.